The rain fell heavily on the small village, turning the dirt roads into slippery mud. It was an ordinary day for the people, just like any other. But the calmness of the moment would soon be shattered by something no one could have expected. In the middle of the village stood a small wooden house, worn down by time and the harsh weather. Inside, a mother and her young daughter were preparing a meal. The scent of fresh bread and soup filled the air, making it a comforting, homely place to be. The girl, no more than 8 years old, helped her mother as best as she could. Her small hands stirred the pot, and her innocent eyes gleamed with joy. The mother smiled at her, brushing the strand of wet hair from her face. "You'll be a great cook one day," the mother said softly, her voice filled with love. But suddenly, the peace was broken by a loud sound, a distant rumble, like the growl of a thunderstorm. The girl froze for a moment, looking up at her mother. The rumbling grew louder, closer. It wasn't thunder. It was something else, something far more frightening. The mother stood up quickly, her face changing from calm to worry. She hurried to the window, peering out into the dark, rainy sky. What she saw made her heart stop. Dark shapes moving quickly across the horizon. They were approaching. "Get away from the window," she shouted urgently to her daughter. The girl's eyes widened in confusion, but she obeyed. She ran to her mother, grabbing her hand as they both quickly moved towards the back of the house. The girl was scared, but she didn't know why. She was too young to understand the danger, too young to grasp what was coming. Outside, the sky seemed to grow darker, and the rumbling sounds became clearer. This was not a storm. It was the sound of war, and it was headed right toward them. The mother moved quickly, pulling her daughter with her into the back room. The walls were thin, and the cold air made the house feel even more fragile. She pulled a small chest from under the bed, opening it to reveal old, dusty weapons. The girl stared at them, wide-eyed. She had never seen them before. "What's happening, Mommy?" she asked, her voice trembling. "We need to hide, sweetheart." "It's not safe here anymore," the mother replied, her voice shaking despite her best efforts to remain calm. "Something is coming, and we need to survive." Just as she was about to say more, there was a loud knock on the door, followed by a man's voice calling from the outside. "Open up. We need your help," the man shouted. "There's no time to explain. The enemy is already close. We have to leave." The mother's heart pounded in her chest. She didn't know whether to trust this man. The village had been peaceful for so long. There hadn't been any trouble for as long as she could remember. But this felt different. The man sounded desperate, but so did the situation. Without another word, the mother grabbed the girl's hand and opened the door slowly. Outside, the man stood under a large, tattered cloak, rain dripping from his shoulders. His face was hidden in shadow, but his eyes were full of urgency and fear. "The war is coming," the man said in a low voice. "And it's not just soldiers we're fighting. They're different. They're not human. We need to get out now." The girl's mother took a deep breath, trying to process everything the man had said. She didn't know whether to believe him, but the fear in his voice told her it wasn't a lie. The air was thick with tension, and it was clear that something far beyond their control was happening. "Come with me," the man said, motioning to them. "There's a place where we'll be safe, but we don't have much time." The mother hesitated for a moment, then looked at her daughter, who was still holding her hand tightly. She nodded, making up her mind. "Stay close, sweetheart," she whispered to the girl, who nodded quietly, though she still didn't fully understand the danger. With that, the mother and daughter followed the stranger out into the rain, unsure of what awaited them. Behind them, the distant sound of marching grew louder, and in the heavy mist, they could see the outline of figures moving closer. Something dark and terrifying was coming. And this was only the beginning. As they ran, the mother couldn't help but wonder what kind of war this was, and how it had all started. It didn't feel like any war she had heard of. But what was more unsettling than the sound of marching soldiers was the strange and eerie silence from the woods ahead. That no birds, no animals, nothing. Only the wet, cold air and the distant pounding of footsteps. The world was changing, and they were caught in the middle of it. What was this war, and what would become of them? The rain was heavier now, pouring down in sheets that made it difficult to see clearly. The girl could barely hear her own footsteps over the loud, relentless patter of the rain hitting the muddy ground beneath them. She stayed close to her mother, clutching her hand tightly as they hurried through the narrow, winding paths of the village. The man who had come to their door moved ahead of them, glancing over his shoulder every few seconds as though he was being followed. His eyes were wide with fear, and his body was tense, as if expecting something terrible to happen at any moment. The mother tried to keep her pace steady, but the weight of the unknown was pressing down on her, and her heart beat faster with each step. "Where are we going?" she asked, her voice shaky but determined. She needed answers, needed to know why their peaceful life was being shattered. The man turned his head slightly, his face barely visible beneath his hood. "We're heading toward the old mountain pass," he said, his voice low and urgent. "It's the only place left where we can be safe, for now." The mother frowned. She had heard stories of the mountain pass before, but she never thought she'd have to use it. The pass was old, dangerous, and known for being nearly impossible to navigate in the dark. It was said that only those who knew the way could survive the treacherous terrain. "Is there really a safe place up there?" she asked, doubt creeping into her words. The man didn't answer immediately. Instead, he quickened his pace, glancing over his shoulder again, his expression growing more worried. The girl's mother knew something was wrong. The fear in the man's eyes was real, and it sent a chill down her spine. As they moved deeper into the woods, the air grew colder. The trees were dense, their thick branches blocking out most of the dim light. It felt like they were walking through a shadowed world, separated from the reality they had once known. The girl looked up at her mother, seeking comfort, but all she saw was the same worry reflected in her eyes. "Mom?" the girl whispered, her voice trembling. "What's happening? Why are we running?" The mother knelt down to the girl's level, brushing the rain from her face with gentle hands. "I don't know, sweetheart," she said softly. "But we'll be okay, I promise you." But even as she said it, she wasn't sure she believed it herself. The world around them was changing so quickly. The peace they had known was gone. And what was worse, it wasn't just soldiers they had to worry about. It was something far more terrifying. The man stopped suddenly, causing them to almost bump into him. He turned around and motioned for them to stay quiet. His eyes scanned the darkness around them, then he stepped off the path and motioned for them to follow. They moved silently, stepping carefully over rocks and branches as the man led them deeper into the woods. "I've been on the run for days," the man whispered, his voice barely audible. "I've seen them, what they really are. They're not like us. They look human, but they aren't. They're something else." The mother's heart skipped a beat. "What do you mean?" she asked, her voice a mixture of fear and confusion. The man hesitated. "They're not just soldiers," he said. "They're aliens, creatures from another world. They've come here to conquer us." The mother couldn't believe what she was hearing. Aliens? It sounded impossible. Like a story out of a book or a movie. But the fear in the man's voice was too real. She had seen the desperation in his eyes when he had knocked on their door, and now she could see it in the way he moved through the woods. "The people in the village," he continued, his voice strained. "They're already here. Some of them have been taken. The rest are either dead or hiding. We don't have much time." The girl's grip on her mother's hand tightened. She had no idea what was going on, but she could feel the fear growing inside her. She wanted to believe her mother when she said everything would be fine, But the situation was far beyond anything she could understand. Why aren't they here yet? The mother asked. Why aren't they chasing us? They're waiting, the man answered, his voice low. They're patient. They know we'll run. They'll pick us off one by one. The mother felt a chill run down her spine. So what are we supposed to do? Where do we go? We keep moving. We make it to the mountain pass. It's the only chance we have. The man's words were final, and there was nothing left to argue. With no other option, they continued on their journey. But every step they took seemed to bring more uncertainty, more fear. The unknown was closing in around them, and the mother couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. Suddenly, the sound of distant footsteps broke through the silence of the woods. The girl's heart began to race. The footsteps weren't far away. They're close, the man muttered under his breath. We need to move faster. The three of them picked up the pace, but the mother could feel the air around them growing colder. The tension was thick and the fear was almost suffocating. As they reached the edge of the woods, the sound of footsteps grew louder, and the shadows ahead seemed to move. The strange figures were coming. The mother's heart pounded in her chest. What was out there? What were they facing? And how much time did they really have before it was too late? The air grew heavier with every step they took. The trees around them seemed to close in tighter, as though they were pushing them forward. The strange, eerie quiet of the forest had settled over them like a blanket, but in the distance, there was still the faint sound of something moving, something not quite right. The mother's mind raced with questions, but the fear that gripped her heart left little room for answers. Her eyes flicked nervously toward the man who was leading them. His body was tense and his eyes were constantly scanning their surroundings, as if expecting something to leap out of the shadows at any moment. Where exactly are we going? The mother asked again, her voice barely more than a whisper. How far is the mountain pass? The man didn't answer immediately, instead pulling them off the narrow path and guiding them up a steep hill. The rain was still coming down in torrents, but they didn't dare stop. The wind howled through the trees, and the air felt colder, as if the world itself was holding its breath. It's not far, the man said, glancing at the mother. But we have to be careful. They've been watching the paths, waiting for us to make a mistake. The pass might not be as safe as I thought. What do you mean by that? The mother asked, her heart sinking at his words. Is there something else out here? They're not just following us, he replied, his voice strained. They've set up traps. The pass might be full of them. The girl, still holding tightly to her mother's hand, could feel the weight of the man's words. Traps? What kind of traps? And who were these creatures really? Suddenly, the man stopped in his tracks, his body stiffening as he heard something in the distance. It was the sound of footsteps scrunching leaves and twigs underfoot. Not just one or two footsteps, but many. They were close. Too close. They're coming, the man muttered under his breath. We need to hurry, now. Without waiting for a response, he began to run, pulling the mother and daughter behind him. The path grew steeper, and the rain seemed to intensify, making the ground slippery and difficult to navigate. They could hear the distant sound of something heavy crashing through the trees. Whatever was following them was not trying to be stealthy. It was closing in fast. The mother's breath came in ragged gasps, and her muscles burned as she tried to keep up. Her daughter was struggling too, but she was determined to stay by her side. The man in front of them was moving faster now, his legs strong and sure as he led them higher up the hill. Then, without warning, they reached a clearing. The trees parted, and the rain poured down in full force. The ground was wet and slick, and the wind howled through the space like a wild animal. At the far side of the clearing was a narrow path that seemed to lead up into a jagged mountain range. The pass is just up ahead, the man said, but his voice lacked conviction. But we have to be quick. Before the mother could respond, She heard the unmistakable sound of footsteps again, louder this time. They weren't alone anymore. The creatures were closing in, and the darkness of the forest seemed to swallow them whole. "There's no time," the man said urgently. "Follow me, and don't look back." They ran, the girl stumbling a few times but always managing to keep her balance. The shadows of the trees stretched long, and every step seemed to take them deeper into a world they didn't understand. The mountain path was barely wide enough to fit all three of them, and it grew steeper the higher they went, but the sound of footsteps didn't stop. In fact, it grew louder. "We're not alone," the mother said, her voice tight with fear. "What are they? They're not human," the man said quickly. "They're aliens, creatures from another world. They've come to take over our planet. We're not the first ones they've attacked." The mother could hardly believe it. Her mind raced as she tried to make sense of what he was saying. Aliens? She had heard stories, but never thought they were real. Now here they were being hunted by something far more terrifying than anything she could have imagined. Suddenly, a flash of movement caught her eye. A shadow darted between the trees, quick and silent, like a predator stalking its prey. The mother's heart skipped a beat, and she grabbed her daughter, pulling her close. "Keep going." The man shouted ahead of them. "The pass is just up ahead." But the path was narrowing, and it was getting harder to see. The fog from the rain mixed with the shadows, and the mountain seemed to rise higher and higher around them, closing them in. The girl's small feet slipped on the wet rocks, but her mother's grip remained firm. Then, without warning, the man stopped dead in his tracks. His eyes were wide with fear, and his body tensed. The mother and daughter froze, their hearts racing. "They're here," the man whispered. "They found us." From the shadows, a figure stepped forward. Tall, thin, and cloaked in dark robes, it moved with a strange, fluid grace. Its face was hidden in the darkness, but its eyes glowed with an eerie, unnatural light. "Run!" The man shouted, but it was too late. The figure raised its hand and a strange hum filled the air. The ground trembled, and the sound of 100 footsteps echoed in the distance. More figures, more creatures, emerged from the shadows, surrounding them on all sides. The mother's heart pounded in her chest. She tried to move, but her legs felt like they were made of stone. The girl clung to her, trembling with fear. Figure stepped forward, its eyes narrowing. Then, in a voice that was both cold and commanding, it spoke. "You are ours now," it said. The eerie hum of the alien's voice still lingered in the air, sending shivers down the mother's spine. Her heart pounded in her chest, a loud, frantic beat that drowned out all other sounds. She could feel her daughter clinging to her side, trembling with fear, and she held her tighter, unwilling to let go. The figure before them stepped closer, its long, slender form bathed in an unnatural light. The air around them seemed to warp, as if the very space itself was bending to the will of these creatures. The mother's legs were stiff with terror, and she wanted to run, but there was nowhere to go. The mountain pass was behind them, and the figures had surrounded them. The man who had led them here stood frozen, staring at the alien in front of him with a mixture of fear and anger. He opened his mouth to speak, but the alien raised a hand, silencing him. "You are trespassers," the alien said, its voice cold and unnerving. "Your world belongs to us now. You have no place here." The mother's mind raced. "What do you want from us?" she demanded, her voice shaky but desperate. She refused to show any more fear. Her daughter was depending on her to protect them, and she couldn't show weakness now. The alien's eyes glowed brighter, its features still mostly hidden in the darkness of its hood. "We need your planet," it said simply. "And we need the resources you have. You, the people, are merely obstacles in our way. But those who survive will serve us." The mother's blood ran cold. "Serve you?" she repeated, disbelief and anger rising within her. "You're going to kill us all?" The alien's glowing eyes locked onto hers. Not all, it said, its voice deep and chilling. You have a choice. Surrender yourself to us, and we will spare you. Your survival is a trade your lives for your world's resources. The girl clung to her mother, sensing the danger in the air, but she didn't understand. She was too young to fully comprehend the terrifying situation they were in. The mother's heart raced, but she refused to give in to fear. She glanced at the man beside them, who had started to inch closer to the alien. His fists clenched. "We will never surrender," he spat, his voice full of defiance. "We'll fight you to the end." The alien's cold gaze flickered towards him, and it tilted its head slightly. "You can fight, but it will not change your fate. Resistance is futile. You have seen what we can do." The mother's stomach churned. The aliens were powerful. They had seen what had happened to the village, the devastation they had left behind. She had no illusions about the kind of power they wielded. But surrendering, giving up without a fight was that really their only choice? The man stepped forward, his face set in grim determination. "We may not have your strength, but we will fight. You can take our world, but you'll never take our will." For a brief moment, the alien seemed to consider his words. Its glowing eyes flickered, almost as if it was studying him, weighing his words carefully. Then, it spoke again, its voice sharp and unwavering. "If you choose resistance, then your death will be swift. But if you choose surrender, we can offer you a chance to live. Your world will die, but you may survive. The choice is yours." The mother's mind was racing, torn between the brutal reality of the situation and her desire to protect her daughter. They couldn't fight the aliens. They had no weapons, no way to defend themselves. The odds were stacked against them, and every instinct told her that surrendering was the only way to save her daughter's life. But could she live with herself? If she chose to give in to these invaders, could she stand by while her world was destroyed? The silence between them was deafening. The alien's offer hung in the air like a dark cloud, pressing down on them all. The girl's small voice finally broke through the tension. "Mom, what's happening? Why are they here?" Her words were full of confusion, but her eyes were filled with fear. The mother looked down at her daughter, her heart breaking. "They're here to take our world, sweetheart. But we won't give up without a fight." But the fear in her voice betrayed her. She knew the truth. They didn't stand a chance against these beings. Even with the man's defiance, there was nothing they could do. "We don't have much time," the man said urgently, his eyes scanning the surrounding area. "If we don't act now, we'll be surrounded." The alien didn't move, but its presence was suffocating. The mother could feel her muscles tense as the figure in front of them seemed to grow even taller, its otherworldly power pressing down on them. The man suddenly turned toward the mother. "I have an idea. It's dangerous, but it's the only way. Follow me." Before the mother could respond, the man lunged forward, pulling the girl's hand and dragging her behind him. The alien was momentarily distracted, watching them with calculating eyes, but it did not move to stop them. "Move quickly," the man urged, his voice sharp. "I know a way through the pass, but it won't be easy." The mother hesitated for a moment, her heart torn between the fear of what lay ahead and the hope that maybe, just maybe, they could escape. With a deep breath, she nodded, taking her daughter's hand and following the man. They ran, weaving through the jagged rocks and narrow paths of the mountain pass. The sound of footsteps behind them grew louder, but the alien figures did not pursue them immediately. Instead, they seemed to be waiting, watching. But the man's plan was risky. The pass was treacherous, and there was no telling what kind of traps the aliens had set up. Every step felt like it could be their last. "Keep going," the man urged. "We're almost there." But the mother couldn't shake the feeling that they were being led into an even worse trap. If the aliens had allowed them to run this far, there had to be a reason. They couldn't let their guard down. They couldn't afford to trust anyone. The air was thick with tension as they scrambled up the narrow path, the sound of footsteps echoing behind them. The mother's heart pounded in her chest as she clung to her daughter, trying to keep up with the man in front of them. The mountain pass was even more treacherous than she had imagined, with loose rocks and jagged edges, threatening to send them tumbling down the cliffs. The rain continued to pour down, making everything slippery and dangerous. The man led them through the winding paths, his eyes constantly scanning the shadows around them. Every so often, he would glance over his shoulder, making sure they weren't being followed. But the mother could feel it, the strange, heavy presence of the alien figures watching them from the distance. They were close, she could sense it. "Are we almost there?" the mother asked, her voice strained from the exertion. Man didn't answer immediately, his breath coming in heavy gasps as he continued to move swiftly up the mountain. "We're close," he said finally, though his tone lacked the confidence he had once had. "But we need to hurry." The mother felt a knot form in her stomach. Something didn't feel right. The man's urgency, the way he kept looking behind him, was as if he was trying to outrun something far worse than the aliens chasing them. She tried to ignore the growing sense of unease, focusing instead on getting her daughter to safety. But as they rounded a sharp corner, the man stopped suddenly, his body tensing. "Stay back," he whispered urgently, holding up his hand. Mother froze, her breath catching in her throat. "What's wrong?" The man's eyes were wide, filled with fear. "This is it. The trap. They've been waiting for us." Before the mother could respond, there was a low mechanical hum, followed by a flash of light. The ground beneath them began to shake, and suddenly, the path ahead was filled with a blinding white light. The mother shielded her eyes, heart racing, but it was too late. She had been too distracted by the alien presence, too unaware of the true danger ahead. Out of the light, figures began to appear, emerging from the shadows in a fluid, almost liquid-like motion. Tall, thin, and ghostly white, they seemed to float just above the ground. Their eyes glowed with an eerie blue light, and their features were sharp, alien in every sense of the word. They moved as one, with an unsettling precision that sent chills down the mother's spine. The man beside her swore under his breath, "It's a trap just like I feared." The aliens surrounded them in an instant, their forms closing in from all sides. The man drew a sharp breath, his eyes wide with terror as he backed away, pushing the mother and daughter behind him. "You shouldn't have followed me," he muttered, as if speaking to himself. "What?" the mother said, her voice rising in panic. "What do you mean?" Before the man could answer, one of the alien figures stepped forward. Its eyes locked onto the man, and in an instant, he was thrown backward, crashing to the ground as if an invisible force had hit him. "Betrayal," the alien said in a voice that was both cold and ancient. It sounded like the voice of death itself. "You led them here. You are a traitor." The mother's heart stopped as she stared at the man. Betrayal? The man had led them here on the promise of safety, but now she realized it had all been a lie. The man slowly stood up, his face pale. I didn't mean to." "They promised me." "They promised you nothing," the alien interrupted. "You are weak, just like the rest of them. You will serve us now." The man took a step back, his body shaking. "No, please. I never wanted this. I thought I could make a difference." "I thought..." The alien's hand shot out, and the man was immediately lifted off his feet, his body floating in midair. "You are nothing," the alien hissed, its voice echoing in the air. "You will pay for your actions." The girl's grip on her mother tightened. The mother could feel her heart sinking, the weight of the situation crashing down on her. She had trusted the man, believed that he could help them escape. And now, everything had fallen apart. "Please," the mother whispered, tears welling up in her eyes. "Please let us go. We don't want to fight." The alien's eyes shifted to her, its expression unreadable. For a moment, it seemed to consider. Her words, and then it spoke in a voice that was both cold and indifferent. "You will die with him," the alien said. "The choice is simple, serve us or perish." The mother's heart twisted in her chest. She had always hoped for a chance to survive, to protect her daughter. But now, in this moment, she realized that survival came at a terrible price. And, in the face of such power, there was nothing they could do to escape. The man's body crumpled to the ground, lifeless. The aliens turned their attention back to the mother and daughter, their cold eyes locking onto them like predators closing in on their prey. But then, just as the alien raised its hand, ready to strike, a voice broke through the tension. "Wait!" The alien paused, its eyes narrowing. From the shadows, another figure emerged, a young girl, no older than 12, wearing a torn cloak. Her face was hidden beneath the hood, but there was something about her that seemed different. The alien's eyes flicked to her, and the other. Alien stood still, as if waiting for instructions. The girl stepped forward slowly, her eyes filled with determination. "You can't do this," she said, her voice shaking but full of strength. "They are innocent, let them go." The alien, before her, hissed, a low, angry sound. "You speak when you are not welcome, you dare challenge us." The girl didn't back down. "I will do whatever it takes to save them," she said boldly. The mother was stunned. Who was this girl? And how did she have the courage to stand against these creatures? But before anyone could move, the alien raised its hand again. "Enough," it said coldly. "You will all pay." The alien figures began to close in once more, but this time, the young girl stepped between them, blocking their path. The tension in the air grew unbearable as the two sides stared at each other, each unwilling to yield. The fate of the mother, daughter, and the strange girl now hung in the balance. Would they survive this? Or would the aliens claim their lives as well? The mountain pass was shrouded in silence, a thick, unnatural stillness that seemed to settle over everything. The aliens hovered in the shadows, their glowing eyes watching the strange girl who had appeared from nowhere. The young girl stood, firm, blocking the path of the alien forces as though she had been born to face them. The mother clutched her daughter close, her heart racing as she watched the standoff unfold before them. The girl who had intervened, standing defiantly in front of the aliens, was clearly determined, but the mother couldn't help but wonder how much longer they could hold their ground. The alien leader hissed, its voice dripping with cold disdain. "You dare to defy us?" it sneered. "You are nothing, a mere child with no power." The mysterious girl did not falter, her small hands trembling, but her voice remained steady. "You are the ones who have no power," she said firmly. "You may have come from another world, but this world is not yours to take. It belongs to us, to the people." The alien's eyes narrowed, and for a moment, there was a strange, unsettling quiet. The tension in the air was almost suffocating. The young girl's words had struck something deep within the alien leader, something it could not ignore. "You do not understand the truth," the alien said coldly. "The resources of this planet belong to us. Your world, your life, your future, none of it matters. We will take it all." The young girl's eyes softened for a brief moment, and the mother could see the sorrow behind them. "I understand more than you think," she said, her voice almost a whisper. "I understand that the universe does not have to be divided, that there's more to life than taking and destroying. But you've forgotten that." The alien's eyes flared with anger, but before it could speak, the mysterious girl raised her hand, and something strange happened. A pulse of light, a glowing energy, emanated from her, stretching outward, pushing back against the alien forces. The mother's breath caught in her throat as she watched the alien figures hesitate, their forms flickering, as if the girl's power was beginning to affect them. The aliens recoiled, their once assured presence wavering. The leader raised its hand, sending a powerful shockwave toward the girl, but she stood strong, her body surrounded by a shimmering aura. "We will not bow to you," she said, her voice clear and full of determination. Suddenly, the ground beneath them trembled. The pass shook violently as if the mountain itself was reacting to the girl's will. A massive crack opened in the earth beneath the alien forces, and the aliens screamed as they were pulled into the abyss below. The once mighty invaders, now powerless, fell into the darkness, their glowing eyes disappearing into the chasm. Mountain returned to silence, and the atmosphere shifted. The aliens were gone. The threat that had loomed over them for so long was finally defeated. The girl, still standing in the middle of the path, lowered her hand. Her aura faded, and her body slumped, exhausted from the exertion. The mother and daughter, still in shock, looked at the girl, unsure of what to say. They had been saved, but by whom? And how? The girl collapsed to her knees, breathing heavily, but her eyes were still filled with determination. She looked up at the mother and daughter, her face softening. "They won't be back," she said softly. "I made sure of it. The path is safe now." The mother kneeled down beside the girl, her heart full of gratitude. "Who are you?" she asked, her voice full of awe. "How did you do that?" The girl smiled weakly, her face tired but content. "I've been waiting for someone who could help. I knew the aliens were coming, and I knew I couldn't stop them alone. But together, we could." The mother's eyes widened. "You knew?" "You knew all along?" The girl nodded. "I'm from here," she said softly. "Not from your time, but from the future. I was sent to stop them before they could destroy everything. My mission was to protect this world, to make sure that humanity had a chance to survive." The mother's mind struggled to process everything. The idea of time travel, of a girl from the future, was almost too much to understand, but somehow it felt right. The girl had come when they needed her most, and she had saved them. "Thank you," the mother whispered, her voice full of emotion. "We would have died without you," the girl smiled faintly. "It's my job," she said simply. "But I couldn't have done it without you. Without your courage to keep going, even when it seemed hopeless." The mother nodded, glancing at her daughter who was still holding her hand tightly. Together, they had made it through the worst of it. The aliens were gone, and they were safe for now. As the girl stood up, her exhaustion still evident, but her resolve unbroken, the mother felt a strange sense of peace. The world they had known had changed, but the fight was far from over. There would be other challenges, other battles to face. But for now, they had survived. And that was enough. "You're free to go," the girl said, her eyes soft but firm. "The world is yours again. Just remember, this peace will only last if you protect it." The mother and daughter nodded, the weight of their journey heavy on their shoulders, but their hearts filled with hope. They had faced the unknown, the terrifying, and the impossible. And now, they had a future ahead of them. Together, the girl turned and began to walk back into the shadows of the mountain pass, disappearing as silently as she had arrived. The mother watched her go, a deep sense of gratitude in her heart. The girl had changed everything. And with her help, they would rebuild. Asterisk.